Hello, and welcome to the C3 Method Podcast with your host, Robert Polenic. Our goal is to educate you on everything health and fitness related with a clear, concise, and customized approach. We want you to know what you need to know and how to apply it in a way that fits you best. Today's podcast number 2261. The topic is nutrition, and the title is Using Carbs to Preserve Muscle Mass. So yes, I'm going to be talking about how you can use carbohydrates to preserve muscle, and that sounds probably weird considering that we mostly associate protein with muscle mass. So it is true that when we make muscle, it is essentially derived from protein. So our body takes our dietary protein, breaks it down into amino acids, and that's essentially the building blocks for creating muscle tissue. The concept of using carbohydrates to preserve muscle is mostly common when people are in a caloric deficit, so they're dieting for fat loss, and or maybe they're getting ready for a competition, they're getting ready for an event, so their calories are very restricted in the sense that they might not be in a deficit, but they're holding a very strict maintenance. And then with that being a limiter in their total calories, it can sometimes negatively impact their workout energy and thus their performance. What's important to understand is that when we lift weights, when we exercise, that is the stimulus that our body needs in order to not only create new muscle tissue, but to hold on to the muscle tissue that it currently has. I've helped people do a lot of like bodybuilding type shows, aesthetic competitions. That would be bikini, wellness, figure, women's physique, men's physique, classic physique, and men's bodybuilding. So there's a lot of categories there. And in that genre of training, when I first started coaching people for it, when I first started getting into it, it wasn't uncommon that during the prep phase, during the contest prep, which is when they're dieting, so they're in a pretty extreme caloric deficit, that their training would then be modified with the intent to help continue the calorie deficit. So as they would get closer to a competition, they would start to increase their reps per set. They would maybe start doing more total volume in their training. They would add techniques like supersets and circuits. So rather than doing one exercise, you do a set, you take like a 3-minute rest, do a set, take a 3-minute rest. They would now do 2 exercises back to back. Then maybe instead of a 3-minute rest, only a 2-minute rest. Then it became, well, maybe I can do 3 exercises back to back to back, and then maybe only take a 1-minute rest. And what they found was that people would start to lose muscle tissue, especially towards the end of that diet phase. So they would be in an extreme caloric deficit. Their training, due to the changes they made in the training, the heaviness of the weights that they were using in training went lower, 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 lower. The intensity was still sky high. If you ask them how hard their training was, they would probably say it was even worse than in the off season. But the weight load intensity would go lower and lower and lower. What happened, essentially, is they were making an environment in which maintaining muscle mass was no longer the body's outcome from the training. The body didn't end the training session saying, holy cow, I really need all the muscle I have. It ended the training session saying, oh my gosh, I cannot breathe. I cannot move the mass that I am as efficiently for this much volume and this high of intensity as what the person is asking me to do, as what the demand is. So the body started to lower its weight. And one way for it to weigh less is to lose muscle tissue. So when they would exercise and they would damage tissue, they then weren't eating a lot of calories. And even though they were eating sufficient protein, they didn't have the calorie fuel source in order to build and repair the tissue that was being broken down. And then also they didn't have the demand now that the body felt that was necessary. So as they would tear up muscle in training, the body wouldn't repair all the muscle that was torn, and it certainly wouldn't put on new muscle. This was actually exacerbated when people were not hormonally supported. So maybe they weren't taking exogenous forms of hormones like testosterone. So they weren't optimizing their hormones, which is related to creating an environment which optimizes muscle creation. If somebody was not taking exogenous hormones, by being in a calorie deficit over a sustained period of time, by being involved with high stress and like high frequency training, their hormonal profile would decrease. Their sleep was probably crap, their cortisol probably went up, and the environment for the body to be optimal in its hormones would be reduced lower, lower, lower. So their natural testosterone production would be down. Their natural growth hormone production would be down. Therefore, the underlying hormonal support wasn't there. The fuel source needed through carbs and fats to utilize the protein that was available wasn't there. And then the demand from the training didn't support the intended outcome of building muscle, let alone holding on to the muscle. So what they found was that training intensity, it was better to optimize for weight load during contest prep, even in a calorie deficit, because if you kept the heaviness of the training, you kept the stimulus that the body needed to maintain the muscle tissue that it had. Now you have to do that safely because you are in a calorie deficit. You're a little more fatigued, a little more tired. You're going to have other stresses going on. But to still optimize for heaviness of weight load is extremely important and is necessary in order to keep the desired amount of muscle mass that you would like. This then leads into the concept of using carbohydrates to preserve muscle is related to using carbohydrates in order to optimize training performance. If we are so underfed in our energy nutrients that we cannot train optimally, we will not optimize the conditions in which the body needs to hold on to the muscle tissue that it has. A less complex way of saying that is, if you eat such little amount and you feel like absolute crap, you will not be able to train to the same intensity that you normally do. Your quality of training will go down, the weight load you can use will go down, and therefore the stimulus to maintain the muscle tissue you currently have will go down. This leads us to the understanding that using carbohydrates in a proper timing and proper volume amount can allow us to optimize our training stimulus, which then allows us to optimize muscle maintenance, muscle preservation. I want to give an example of what this looks like for a couple of clients. I'm actually going to start with myself. So I've been dieting this year. I started last summer at 297 pounds. I got down to 277 by the end of the year, so I started this year at 277. I'm now down to 255. The way in which I'm doing it is I kind of push for 3 weeks, I let my body relax and recover for a week, and then I repeat that. And that's a pretty loose, way of saying it or explaining it. With that in mind, that means for 3 weeks I'm going to be in an extreme calorie deficit, and then for 1 week I'm going to be near calorie maintenance, maybe probably still a little bit under. And then the severity of the deficit in those 3 weeks is different. So the first week after the recovery week, I'm in a pretty extreme deficit. For the simplicity of numbers and understanding things, let's say I'm in a 1,500 calorie deficit per day for a week. Then the second week I drop to only 1,000 calorie deficit. Then the third week I drop to a 500 calorie deficit. Then the fourth week is my recovery week, and maybe I'll do at maintenance, so a 0 calorie deficit. What happens during that time is the recovery week is nice, and by the end of the week I have good training sessions, good energy, feeling fired up and excited and motivated to do that next week, which will be a really really high intense, high misery kind of week. During that week, when I'm in a 1,500 calorie deficit, if I time my carbohydrates correctly, I can still optimize my training stimulus. I can do this with a couple factors being controlled. Number one would be is to work out as early in the day as I can, because we do generally just have more energy at the beginning of the day. And that's even like emotional focus. There's a whole bunch of other kind of components to quote unquote energy. Just your willingness to do something that's miserable is better at the beginning of the day than it is at the end of the day. So I aim to do my workouts as early in the day as I can. And then I know that each day when I'm coming into my time to work out, my glycogen, my stored carbohydrates, the energy that my muscle have just in-house. So when we consume carbohydrates, our body breaks that down to glucose. It then pairs it with sodium and water. And then the combination of those three things, glucose, sodium, and water, our body forms what's called glycogen, which is fuel. It then stores glycogen in the muscle cells for when the muscles need fuel. You can think of it as a gas tank in a car. So we put gas in our car and then we can use it and burn it off, as we need as we move the car around. So our body likes to form glycogen when it can. And then the muscles have that glycogen available when we ask the muscles to do something. When we say, hey, move this weight or go walk across the room or pick up this thing, the muscles will say, okay, fine, I'll use the fuel I have, which it likes to have as the form of glycogen, which is glucose stored in the muscles. So I know that when I go into my workout time, I would be coming into that time with emptied out glycogen storage, meaning I don't really have any carbohydrates stored in my muscles. This is beneficial because our body will fill glycogen via carbohydrate intake before it would convert that to body fat. So if I consume, say, 100 grams of carbohydrates, my body is going to take those carbohydrates, break them down into glucose, pair it with sodium and water, and form glycogen and put that into my muscles. It would do that until it feels like the muscles are saturated. And then once saturated, if I were to continue to eat carbohydrates, the body would then start to convert that over to body fat in order to provide extra energy for the future if and when my organs may need it. This means that until my glycogen stores are full, I can eat carbohydrates and have very minimal concern about them being converted to body fat. The key then is to understand, well, how many carbohydrates can my body hold before it would convert to body fat? That's different per individual based on muscle mass, and there's going to be some other components involved as well. But muscle mass is a huge factor, considering that where the body stores the glycogen is in your muscles. So the bigger and more muscle you have, the more storage capacity you have. Now, for my body weight, I can experiment with this and find some other things. There's calculations and all this stuff. But I know that for me, around 100 to 200 grams of carbohydrates is plenty enough. That if I have that around 60, depending on the type of food I'm consuming, I guess. So if I have that before the workout, say 100 grams of carbohydrates, I know that's well under what my body would store as fat. And I know that it's enough energy to provide a good workout energy so I can lift heavy weights, get a good stimulus out of my training that allows me to hold on to the muscle tissue that I have, if not possibly actually create enough of a stimulus that my body feels new muscle is necessary. So I've found around 100 grams of carbs works really well for me. If I have sugary carbs, they're going to digest very quickly, so I'd want to have them closer to the workout. So if I was going to work out, maybe I found out like, oh crap, I'm going to start my workout in about 15 minutes, then I would want carbohydrate source that breaks down and is available in 15 minutes. And that would be things like candy. I could have Skittles, for example. Whereas if I'm maybe 60 to 90 minutes before the workout, maybe I'd want to have carbohydrates that break down slower because I want them to be available in 60 to 90 minutes, not 15 minutes. So I might have white rice, jasmine rice. That's a common fuel source that I'll use. And you can pick and choose based on the digestion rate of different carbohydrate sources and based on your preference for what you like the taste of. The idea of using this approach is I want to give my body enough carbohydrates before the workout that I can feel really good energy during the workout so I can maximize the muscle preservation stimulus of the workout. I don't want to eat too much because then I could potentially accrue body fat. But if I don't eat any, I'll have crappy energy during the workout. I won't maximize the weight load stimulus, and I'll actually decrease the ability for my body to actually preserve muscle mass because I won't be lifting heavy enough to demand that the muscle I have stays. So that's essentially the balance we're looking for, is 0 carbohydrates before the workout, really not going to give me great energy. Some carbohydrates before the workout, great. Great energy, great muscle preservation. Too many carbohydrates before the workout, well, I'm going to have great energy, I'm going to have great muscle preservation, but I now have maybe overshot and I'll have glycogen that needs to be burned off before I'm then back to an optimal kind of fat loss state. Can you lose body fat while having some glycogen? Absolutely. But a way in which to monitor fat loss would be to keep glycogen stores very low, if not quote unquote emptied, as much as you can control and predict, away from your workouts. So I'd want to load carbohydrates before the workout, use them during the workout, and then have minimal, if any, stored carbohydrates, glycogen, the whole time post-workout leading into the next workout. That's going to allow me to optimize fat loss post-workout all the way till the next workout when I would eat carbohydrates again. This sequencing, where I eat carbohydrates before the workout, burn them off during the workout so I can maximize muscle preservation stimulus, and then avoid carbohydrates so I'm glycogen depleted between training sessions, is a great system for optimizing performance, optimizing muscle preservation, but also optimizing fat loss. So I'm doing that and I'm seeing great results. I've done that with my wife, Meredith, who competed last year. She did 3 figure competitions, and she was actually 40 years old in her last one and did great. We ended up qualifying for nationals, and she did an awesome job. We used that strategy the whole way through. So she was able to eat carbohydrates every single day of her diet. She lost over 40 pounds during the diet, by the way. So it was at the beginning of the year she just decided, I need to get my life kind of more controlled on the physical health aspect. So I want to do a show. And we're like, okay. So she decided to do one. She had done one back in 2017, actually 2 back in 2017. So she's not like new to it, but it had been a while. And it was a great way for her to be motivated to lose body fat and kind of get back on self-care kind of habits. But she lost over 40 pounds, never did any cardio, and she ate carbohydrates every day. We just used this cycling approach with preloading carbohydrates and then making sure that we're in a carbohydrate deficit. And that was all in combination with being in a caloric deficit. So the timing of carbohydrates, how much you eat, still has to be factored into your total calorie intake to make sure that during the entire process you're still in a deficit. I have another client who does her workouts early in the morning. She runs and does weight training in the morning, so she has a high amount of carbohydrates. I believe right now she's at around 80 grams of carbohydrates in her pre-workout meal. She'll then go do the running, do the weight training, and then the rest of the day she keeps her carbohydrates around 100 to 120. So our total daily intake is around 200 grams of carbohydrates. Her calories are just under maintenance, but this is allowing her to get leaner. She's actually getting stronger and seeing some muscle growth because our protein is at about 1 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. So her performance in running is going up, her muscle mass is going up, she's getting leaner, she feels good during her training, which is key, so that way she's optimizing weight load. And then outside of training, she has a little bit of low energy here or there, but it's manageable. and that's allowing her to achieve her goals. She's increasing performance, increasing strength, increasing muscle mass, but while also getting leaner. I have people who train in the evening, and our structure would be is the first meal of the day, we're going to focus more on proteins and fats. The middle of the day, we're going to focus actually mostly on proteins and very minimal fat, try to deplete the body. And then leading into the workout, they have a carb-based meal pre-workout, and it depends on how far ahead of the workout, depends on what type of food they get to have. And then during the workout, they crush it, they have a great time. And then post-workout, we focus on fats and proteins, so that way they have the resources they need throughout the night to build new muscle tissue and replenish some of the energy storage that they're going to want to use and need for the next day. So you can modify the timing of the carbohydrates based on the daily schedule. You can also modify the amount of the carbohydrates based on what that individual needs to do the type of training and exercise that they do. So I would classify myself as doing bodybuilding style training, and I do what I would consider a moderate volume. I have clients who do more than I do, and I have clients who do less than I do. So I'm kind of a morning workout person, moderate intensity, moderate volume, and I find that for me, around 100 grams of carbs works out really well. I have some clients, they consume only about 50 grams of carbs. Some clients will actually need a little bit more, but they're more like really high-end performance. So they'll do, maybe 90 minutes or even 2 days. They'll train twice a day, depending on the type of style of training they have and the goals they have and the athlete they are. But this is a concept I wanted to just discuss and raise awareness to, is that you can use carbohydrates to preserve muscle mass. And how that works is that you use carbohydrates to preserve the weight load capacity of your training. And then by being able to maximize weight load capacity, that's how you create preservation of muscle tissue. By continuing to lift really heavy things, the body believes that the muscle you're using to do that is necessary. So it will repair it and possibly actually build upon it between your training sessions. If you'd like to learn more about how to structure your nutrition plan with this in mind, so you can maximize performance, you can maximize strength, muscle mass, and fat loss, reach out to me. My email is c3method@gmail.com, and that's 3 spelled out THREE. So C, just the letter C, 3 THREE method@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, which is c3method.com. You'll see there that we have different services. We have services for one-on-one coaching for just nutrition, or nutrition and training combined if you want me to write your training program. We also have our Patreon service, where you can sign up for a low monthly cost. You get unlimited Q&A. You can ask me anything you want, and I answer everybody's questions every single week. We also have nutrition programming that I'm building up and increasing the volume and the type of service there, so that way you can learn how to write your own nutrition programs and monitor and modify that as needed. And then we have training programs as well. So Q&A, nutrition, and training all at a low cost. You can ask me anything you want and you get your answers. And then I also am doing Patreon services for other gyms and facilities. So this is actually something newish that I've been doing. I've been doing ghost programming for a lot of years, but now I'm packaging it together as a Patreon service and running it for other gyms. So essentially it's online personal training and nutrition consultation that I'm running for other gyms through the company name C3 Method. If you want to learn about any of those services, again, you can go to our website, c3method.com. Awesome. Well, if you like the podcast, please share the podcast. The more people know about it, the more people can be helped by it. If you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name C3 Method. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.